Welcome to At Your Best. I'm Sam, your host, and I'm very happy to have you for this session today. As you may remember, At Your Best is a series of Facebook Live where we invite professional coaches to share with you their tips and tricks to help you to be at your best. So in today's session, we have invited Chun Shek, and I'm very pleased to welcome Chun Shek today. We met together when we both attended a training to become life coach. And today, Chun Shek is on top of being a life coach, is also a corporate trainer. So welcome, Chun Shek. How are you doing today?
Very well, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a bit more about you, who you are, what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a corporate trainer as well as a life coach. What I do is I primarily focus on developing the knowledge, the skills, and the mindset, the attitudes for leadership and for management, as well as communications for the modern day worker. So most of the time, I spend my time with young people who are just starting up in their career, stepping from an individual contributor level to a team manager level, right? So they're just starting to manage people after a few years, and they find themselves struggling to make that transition from being just working on their own tasks to managing the task of a whole team.
And so how do you concretely, how do you help them?
So my work is really twofolded, right? As a trainer, what I do is I like to think of myself as a gardener. I plant seeds in their minds and hoping that some of those seeds would grow into actions that will help them change the way they think, the way they do things, the way they manage their teams. As a coach, I think of myself as a searcher. So I would go into the minds of my clients with a searchlight. I would start shining into different corners. Some of them they may be very well aware of. Some other parts they may not really realize has been there, right? So I'll dig up some of the tools that is already in their minds and say, hey, can you use this? Is this useful, right? And they'd be like, oh, okay, actually, I could make use of some of this. So training and coaching are both work that I do with the minds of people. One is I take a very active part in imparting my knowledge. Another one is where I let my client explore their own minds a little bit with my help and my guidance.
I see. So for most of the people, I think training is quite obvious because we all attended training session with our companies, or it's like even we can make a bridge with school, right? But a lot of people are not very familiar with coaching. So can you tell us a bit more about what is coaching? You talk about planting a seed before, but concretely, let's say that I want to have a coach. How does it work? What will happen?
Okay, so once you engage with a coach, usually what happens is that, I'm just going to use myself as an example. I would sit down with the person and start just having a what we call a chemistry session, right? This is where we try to see if we're good fits for each other, whether we can open up ourselves to each other to work together. Just to let you and your audience know, I myself used to see a coach as well. I found somebody who understands the life circumstances that I'm in, but nonetheless
Mm.
share none of the professional or social circles that I was in. So there's no overlap. For me, that's a good way. That's a good signal for me to know, hey, I can trust this person. I can open up to them. I'm willing to open up my mind to him so that he can help me establish that relationship. And you found a coach that is good for you. The next steps really are, it really varies from person to person. But like I said, a lot of times is finding out what are some of the facilities that are already in our minds, right? A good coach would help you do that. Think about it. A lot of times when we think of the word coach, we think fitness coaches, right? Fitness coaches, what they do is, you know, they tell you, hey, you've got this muscle. This is how you can work it to become stronger, to become healthier. These are some of the exercises you can do. A life coach is very similar. just as a fitness coach doesn't really give you new muscles, they just tell you these are your existing muscles, work them. A life coach would say these are some of the ideas that have been in your mind. You may have been ignoring them in the past, but hey, I'm going to help you work them. I'm going to help you figure out a way to exercise these parts of your mind so that you can become stronger and better and fitter with how you see yourselves in work, in family, in life.
And it happens a lot of times that people make a confusion between life coach and psychologist. Would you have any idea on that? What you would like to share to explain to people the difference, maybe?
Sure. I'm just going to keep going back to the fitness coach example because I think it gives a very nice parallel, right? A healthy person, a person who is not sick, would see a fitness coach to become stronger and healthier. But if you're already sick, you would go see a doctor, right? The same thing happens if you're of sound mind, but there are just some things that you're like, oh, I want to become better at solving problems. I want to become better at several different aspects of my life that I'm just weak at. You can find yourself a life coach. However, if you feel that you're struggling with, emotional or mental issues that may be pathological in nature, it may be better for you to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist to help resolve that first.
I see. And usually, when you start a life coaching relationship, how long does it last for with your client?
It varies, but typically it falls anywhere between 3 to 6 months, right? So it's a rather short period of time. Just like you probably won't see a fitness coach for an extended period of time. You learn some of the skills, you identify some of the things that you have ignored in the past. You work with your coach together for a few very limited sections, which allows you to know, hey, this is how I can make use of that mental facility, and then you move on. It's not a very long process. Just like one of your guests said in your Facebook Live last week, that it shouldn't really be long because then it becomes a different kind of relationship afterwards.
I see. So what do you mean? What you mean is that it's actually thanks to the coaching, people will actually learn some methodologies or tools to be able to use by themselves after the coaching, like what a fitness coach will do by showing you the exercise, and eventually you can practice the exercise by yourself. It's what you mean, actually?
That's exactly it, Sam.
I think it's a very good and simple example because I guess a lot of people go to the gym and have PT and personal trainers, and so thanks. It's very interesting. So I would like to explore another, another phase of your skills, and I know that you have been working with your client with a tool called Total SDI. So can you let us know a bit more about what is Total SDI?
Sure, absolutely. So Total SDI is a set of psychometric analysis. It's really a set of tools that help people understand that the way they see how they behave from the way other people see how you behave, right? So here's a very good graphics that is from the Total SDI folks. You see yourself based on why you're trying to do certain things. Everything that you do starts with your own motives, which then leads to your different intentions depending on the situation. And the outer layer, what we show other people, is our behavior. However, when other people look at you, they look at your behavior first. They don't really know what your intentions or your motives are because they're hidden as the core of who you are. But other people don't see it, right? And this is where conflict sometimes happens. Total SDI is a tool to help demystify why these conflicts happen. They help everyone understand where our motives are coming from, because all of our behavior is ultimately driven by these motives. If there's a common language by which these motives can be described, then the behaviors can be explained, and we can resolve a lot of the conflicts through that.
Interesting. And concretely, can you tell us a bit more about how does it work, and how do you work with your clients to understand this behavior and
Sure.
the motives?
Absolutely. So those of us who have been to university or at work, sometimes we were told to do MBTI, we're told to do a DISC assessment or a Big Five, Ocean, etc., etc. So it ultimately starts with a survey. It's a very short survey, though. It's really only 20 questions, right? For each of the questions is a scenario and 3 different options, 3 different reactions that one might take. What you do is you just rate yourself in terms of how frequently I think in this particular situation I would behave in a certain way. From 0 out of 10. It doesn't take long because, like I said, it's 20 scenarios that are quite common to most of our experience. So it really takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. Once that's done, it will be processed by by PSP, which is the company that administers this, and a certified total SDI facilitator can help you walk through what your result means for yourself and for how other people see you and how you see other people as well.
Okay, so I think that we did this analysis together. You run it for me maybe 1 year ago, something like that, and I was actually very amazed by the result. And so this is actually on the screen the result of my total SDI analysis or assessment. And so can you tell us a bit about how to read that and how to understand it?
Sure, absolutely. The SDI of the total SDI stands for Strength Deployment Inventory. It's presented in a triangle, as you can see on your screen, right? There are 3 different corners. The blue corner represents how you are motivated by concerns for people, right? The red corner tells you about how you're concerned by, how you're motivated by concerns of performance. And then the green represents motivations by concerns of process. None of us really fit into any particular box. We're all a mixture of these 3 concerns. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us not machines. That's what makes us human beings, right? So all of us are a different blend or different mix of these 3 main motivations or concerns, right? For you, Sam, you can see that your motivation value system, or MVS, is kind of in this region where it's quite blue, but also a little bit, it's also quite red at the same time. It doesn't reach very deep into the green corner though, right? So we've gone through this before. It pretty much means that under normal circumstances, when things are going well, you're more or less equally concerned with how other people feel, right? This is where you're drawn to the blue corner, as well as getting things done, right? This is where you're drawn to the red corner, the corner for performance. You're not as much drawn to the green corner, which represents process. It doesn't mean that you don't follow rules. It just means that with all things considered, you would tend to think first about the people and the performance, getting things done, before you think about, okay, so these are the processes, these are the steps I need to follow, these are the procedures. Do you think that's a right description of who you are, or what kind of insight did you get out of this?
I was very surprised because actually, as you said, it's a very short and quick assessment to do, and it takes just a couple of minutes where you need to focus, and not even too much because you don't need to overdo it, right? And actually, reading it again when we were preparing this discussion after 1 year, because I was already very amazed 1 year ago, but actually I was still amazed when I reread it couple of days ago, and this is very me actually. I'm quite balanced between indeed achievements and people, and for me the achievements and people are more important than the way I use. I mean, the path, the way, the journey I use to get results is less important than the result by itself and the people who help me in this journey. So this is really me, and Really,
Mhm.
I was already a big fan of the DISC. We talk about it. I'm a big fan of this DISC assessment
Mhm.
that helps you to understand yourself and the others. But this first part of the assessment was already a wow effect. And again, this was only the first part. So maybe you can talk a bit about the second part of the assessment, which is also very interesting.
Sure. It's interesting that you mentioned about DISC because DISC is typically used by a lot of companies as well. It stands for dominance, if I remember correctly, dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness.
Cool.
These are all descriptors of behavior, right? When we talk about the MVS, we're really talking about the motivation. It's the underlying driver for the behavior. Whereas the DISC would display how you tend to behave. This tells you why you behave in such a way. So your behavior never really gets very, very far from this circle. One thing about DISC I should mention is that it varies from, even for the same person, it can change from situation to situation. So a person can have a different DISC profile for work, for the family, for the social circles, etc., etc. This is a little bit more down to the core, right? So your DISC profile may float around. This is down to the core. However, we should talk about different scenarios because, as you've mentioned, there's a second part to your SDI result, and that's the conflict sequence. And for you, this is indicated by this very long arrow from where your MVS is to here, this arrowhead. This shows your conflict sequence. And the conflict sequence is not so much a mix, but an order of how you would behave, right? So as we can see, if you don't mind me using you as an example, your conflict sequence starts with red, and then it progresses to green, and finally to blue.
Mm-hmm.
The way we can interpret it is that when things don't go so well, remember your red blue is when things go well. When things don't go so well, you shift. And the first concern that you have is, let's get this done. Let's fix this, right? We've got a problem. Let's make sure we solve it. If you can't convince other people to solve it, then you shift to a green mode. The green here for processes really means that, hey, okay, you guys aren't following what I'm saying. Let's take a step back. Let's look at all the pros and cons, all the different implications for a particular course of action that we're going to take. We're going to take a deep dive, analyze everything before we decide what we're going to do. And then finally, if that still doesn't work, you retreat to a blue phase, which is when you're just like, okay, you know what? You guys decide. I can't convince you with my authority, with my assertion. I cannot convince you with my analysis or my reason. I'm just going to accommodate whatever you guys say we're going to do, we're going to do. But so this is how you would go through a conflict when you don't agree with others, and it really shakes the core of who you are. You first start being very assertive, and then you become very analytical, and finally you say, I'm just going to accommodate whatever you guys say. And it's a deeper and deeper layer of conflict. So we typically don't see you, Sam, in particular, getting into the blue phase of this sequence, right? We typically see you getting into the red phase first. And usually that's where it ends.
Yeah.
If it doesn't end, it goes to the green, and then it goes to the blue.
Now it's very interesting, and there may be a lot of people who know me who will watch this video, and this is really me. I think not in all circumstances, because I think there are different sort of somehow situation when some of them can be managed probably easily with your normal behavior, I would say. When definitely there are some where you are in a fight or flight mode, and there is no, your normal behavior will not get you the outcome you want, and I definitely jump into the outcome and the results when these sort of things happen, and it's very funny because it's really me. And again, for those who watch and who know me and who have been working with me and I think it's like it's very obvious. And so again, I really recommend to everyone to run this sort of assessment, and it helps to clarify actually what is a normal situation and what is actually this result when you are in a fighting mode. And I think that with the guidance of a coach, you can really also improve the outcome if you want to improve. Definitely on my side, I would say I jumped too quickly into the results, probably without onboarding enough the people, which eventually put me in some sort of fight where there is no solution. So I actually go, as you said, into some processes then to say, okay, so let's follow the rules. But I'm not sure that following this path will really help me to get the outcome I wish to achieve. So and this is why I think definitely working with someone to help can help to adjust a bit. And I think that by adjusting a bit, it's probably possible to really get better results. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. This is one of the tools that will help you understand how other people would see you, because as someone whose conflict sequence is very deep in the blue would find your first reaction very, very disturbing, whereas for you it's completely normal, right? And if somebody upon facing a conflict just becomes, okay, yeah, you do whatever you want, it may sound like a pushover, but then eventually when he or she moves to the red, you're like, whoa, what just happened here, right? We all know people like them, right? Because we're all different human beings, we all behave differently. Understanding of how these motivation values work could really help us becoming better at navigating our interpersonal relationship with our colleagues, with our family members, with our loved ones. Because knowing where you stand and where other people stand, you can tune your message. You can make your reaction a little bit less strong. You can make it last a little bit shorter instead of longer, right? You can even try to use different behavior that would make it easier for the other person to understand where you're coming from. So it's, like I said, it's just an assessment. It's very simple. It's a triangle. But with a certified coach that helps you navigate through this, it could really help you becoming better at relating with other people in your lives.
And I was thinking about something by listening to you. When you have this mid-year or end of year assessment at your company, often there are feedback that you don't really understand. Like, they flag some sort of blind spots, and they come repetitively, but you are like, really? No, not really. And I think this is what it is, no? The way I see it, when you first showed it to me, I was surprised, interested by surprise. And it took me some time to somehow digest it, because I was not seeing myself as having this behavior until I really took some distance and step back, step up, looked at it from a different angle, and I say, okay, this is true. Actually, I'm behaving like that.
Yeah. And none of the points on the triangle is really a good thing or a bad thing by itself. They just are, right? Somebody who's blue, the first adjective somebody can think of is being very helpful, being very considerate, right? But someone who is too helpful, that same helpfulness then becomes smothering, becomes, somebody who's trying to suffocate you with too much care or too much concern. So it really tells you, for every coin there are two sides. If you think you're behaving very, very aggressively, you can turn that aggressiveness into a quality that is much more palatable by other people. You're still doing what you normally do, but you can frame it in a way that becomes much more acceptable socially by your colleagues.
But when when you gave me the debriefing of the assessment, you talk about like skills and skills which are overdone. So can you maybe share a bit on that?
Absolutely. So total SDI is really a three-part assessment. This is the strength deployment inventory. I worked with Sam on two other parts, which are known as the strengths portrait and the overdone strengths portrait. We don't call it weakness in the language of SDI because, like I said before, helpfulness can turn into smothering. Analytical can turn into, for the lack of a better word, somebody who's a little bit anal, right, about certain things. Each behavior that we do is a strength until we overdo it, until we turn the speaker up to volume 11, right? And then all the sounds becomes very, very jarring to our ears. Same thing with behaviors. If you
Sorry, so can you repeat that? You say
sure,
each behavior we have is a strength until we overdo it, right?
that's right. That's
This is
right.
very
So yeah,
yeah.
it's just like when you have music turn up to volume setting 11 when the maximum is 10. When you turn it up to 11, it starts becoming very, very jarring to your ears, right? But if you tune it to maybe 6 or 7 or 8, it's quite enjoyable until you break above that limit. So it's about really finding out what are some of the behaviors that you tend to use as strength. What are some of the behaviors that you tend to use a little bit less because you don't like them, but it doesn't mean that other people don't like them, right? So sometimes you can try to learn to make use of those behavior, and also figuring out what are some of the behaviors that you overdo that becomes problematic when you react with other people, or some of the behaviors that other people do that you find very disagreeable, but actually they mean well. They just don't relate to you as naturally or as directly. So changing our frame of mind to think, okay, he's not really being anal about this. He's just trying to be very thorough in analyzing the current situation because he wants to move our business to a better place, right? It's changing that frame of mind. It's understanding that every bad behavior of other people that we perceive most likely start from a good motivation or a good intention that we just don't instinctively understand.
It's very interesting, and I think if you don't mind, I would be very happy to have another session in the future to really focus on this tool. I think that we have a lot to learn from it and from you on this, and it will be very very interesting for audience.
I'd be happy to do that, Sam.
Great. So let's move on. I would like to get also your view on something which is very important for us is the routines. So, we are convinced with at your base that routine is a way for people to develop themselves and to help them to be at their best. And I would like to have your opinion on maybe a link between the current situation, which is very very hard for a lot of people with the COVID-19, and the routine. What does it bring, and can I have your thought on that?
Sure. These days, a lot of us are really working from home, staying at home, practicing social distancing. That means we're really not interacting as much with others. For me, the routine that I still keep up to this day is really just to spend longer time with my dogs. I've got 3 dogs, so I need to walk them every morning, every evening. I would be walking them a little bit longer than I used to. This gives me time to really start appreciating how simple they lead their lives. They don't really ask for much. They're happy when I'm with them. In fact, you can't really see it on the screen. One of my dogs has been lying next to me for the last 2 hours, just being very content, sitting by my side. Right? They live lives very simple, and this time of the coronavirus pandemic, which forces us to be very removed socially from our coworkers, from our friends, has given me a little bit more time to think: do we really need to make our life so complicated, right? Or can we actually turn our lives a little bit simpler? What are some of the things that are just excess in our lives that we don't need? So, in terms of routine, the extended amount of time that I get to walk my dogs in the mornings and in the evenings really allow me much more time to reflect and to introspect where I am in this world. What are my purposes? What are my motivations? What am I doing? Are there things that I can learn from these animals that I can apply to in my own lives?
I see. So what you say actually is that yes, this time that you take in the morning really helps you to reflect and to be able to pause actually, right? To pause. It's what you were saying, and the bridge you are making with this situation is that people have somehow can take the opportunity, can be resilient in this situation, and take the
Yeah,
opportunity to pause and to reflect.
yeah. It's like what your guest from the previous week had said. This is probably a good time if you felt yourself in a rut for your work or whatever life situation you're in. This is probably a very good opportunity for you to think about what are your priorities and what would you like to do with your life once we get through this pandemic, once we get through this period of social distancing. Are there anything else that is on your bucket list that you really want to do? Now is a good time to pause, think about it, and maybe with the help of a coach, identify the steps that could get you on the way to achieve that.
Ah, very well, very well. I have a last question for you, Chun Shek. So, because I know that you are like a Swiss knife, huh, and you have a lot of skills, and I would like you to share with us your tips and tricks or your recommendation for people to be at their best. So, what would you recommend them to do to be at their best?
Sure. It's interesting because when you first approached me to talk about at your best, I was thinking it's really not easily achieved because perfection is unattainable, right? We could never be perfect. There's always something missing, right? So the first thing that I think we should always remember is that we would never be at our best because it's just not possible. So if you have unachievable aspirations, it's okay to decide that, hey, you know what? Sometimes I need to let go. I don't have to be hurt by my pride. I can move on and think that some other people can do it and I can live vicariously through them. But just because it doesn't, it cannot be achieved doesn't mean that we shouldn't be striving towards it. We should always try to become better versions of ourselves. To some people, it's excelling at a certain sport, all right, a kind of art, maybe getting, progressing with their career in the business. Maybe for some people, being at the best or becoming better versions of themselves is to become a better mother, a better father, a better caretaker of your loved ones, right? That's
Mm,
that progress of becoming a better version of yourself every single day is how you can live your life at your best. As for me, like you said, I really don't have one particular expertise. You were very flattering when you call me a Swiss knife. I think of myself as a jack of all trades. So my goal is really to expand my horizons as widely as possible. I don't aspire to become a very focused expert in one particular thing, but I want to know as much about as many different things as I can. Right. To me, that's how I become a better version of myself every day, and that's how I would interpret the words at your best.
so, at your best is about learning, right? It's in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
is there
about
any
learning, it's about sharing, it's about exchanging
mm,
ideas.
okay? I think it's very interesting, and I think it's probably a good point to finish this interview and learning and sharing. I think, and since we all the people in the world now have time for to pause, to reflect, they can use this time also to learn and to share, right?
Absolutely. And I hope that, all of your audience are, taking opportunity of this time to really think of, hey, what are some of the things that I can do to add to my life experience and my knowledge, despite the fact that we need to mostly stay at home and not be very interactive with the people that we used to interface on a daily basis. How can I make a better use of the time that we're in right now?
Thanks a lot, Chun Shek. If people wants to find you, where can they find you?
I've got my LinkedIn page. It's quite active. I did have a personal website, but it's been kind of out of date these days. So LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me. Sam, I believe you'd probably put up a link on the
Yes,
Facebook
I will.
page later on. So that's way LinkedIn, Chun Shek, CHUNSHEK. That's how I spell my name. There's only one of me, I think, with that handle. So it's pretty easy to find me that way.
Yes, thanks a lot, Chun Shek. It was really a pleasure to have you today, and thanks for all the things you shared with us. It was very, it was very, I was very inspired by all this discussion, and I hope to see you again and to discuss further next time about the total SDI.
You're very welcome, Sam. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.